We're back to discuss in more detail a life sciences company that's approaching the use of psilocybin, the active compound of magic mushrooms, in a way that many have never heard of before. You can click on the eye just above here, which is a link to our detailed overview of MYND Life Sciences, their team, and there's several ways they look to revolutionize the use of psilocybin for neuropsychiatric disorders such as depression and Alzheimer's. But for today, we're joined with CEO Dr. Lyle Oberg to discuss the exciting developments his team has accomplished and set forth in the second quarter of this year. My good sir, welcome back.
Thank you very much. Great to see you.
Absolutely. And I love the fact of seeing numerous different topics we're going to be discussing today because you've had a very active Q2 of 2021. I'd like to start with just asking about those 4 distinct patent applications that you put through. Can you describe what these 4 pieces of intellectual property are and how these are the backbone for the work that you'll be doing with your company?
Yeah, absolutely. Our first patent that we put out some 2.5 years ago is actually a patent that deals with inflammation in all sorts of different types of diseases. So it's inflammation in general. It's utilizing the genetic pathway that we've discovered and how that can modulate inflammatory processes. So that's everything from inflammatory bowel disease to MS and everything in between. Our second patent, we got more specific. We narrowed that first patent down to become a patent for major depressive disorder, and it's a utilization of all psychedelic drugs in the modulation of major depressive disorder and the treatment of major depressive disorder. So that's number 2, and we think that that's really important. In any suite of patents, you need to narrow it down. Then our third one has proven to be very, very positive. We're working hard on a biomarker, and that biomarker is almost ready to put out. And what it does is it actually is a means or a way to diagnose depression and probably even more importantly to monitor depression. So it can tell you by your levels in your blood, it can tell you exactly if you're going into relapse or if you're getting better. And we hope ultimately that it will also be able to diagnose major depressive disorder. So a huge step when it comes to that. And then our fourth one is slightly different. And our fourth one is really quite exciting. We have an article coming out in one of the top 3 journals, medical journals in the world very, very soon. I can't mention which one it is, but it certainly is one of the best. And it deals with a method of utilizing psychedelics to treat Alzheimer's disease. And when I say treat, I don't just mean stop. I don't just mean delay, but I actually mean regress. And we've shown in mouse models that we can actually regress Alzheimer's disease. So think about that. In mice, and it's not 100% guarantee that it translates into humans, but mice have been the preliminary studies for a lot of things. You actually see the mice regress their Alzheimer's disease. So we're really excited about that one.
Yeah, that'll be an absolutely fascinating one because I know we spoke very in much detail about the depression side of things. Again, you can go up there and click on that link and watch that full interview. But it's the Alzheimer's. That's something that I've watched friends' parents and grandparents be decimated. And there's nothing worse than looking a loved one in the eyes and they don't recognize you anymore. It's absolutely devastating disease to have. So to find something that could potentially work on that is fascinating.
Yeah, it's a tragic disease. And the unfortunate part is there has been no treatment. There's been no treatment to speak of. The FDA approved a drug a couple of weeks ago, which is certainly a step in the right direction. But for many, many people and many, many families, because it's not a type of disease that just affects one person, it affects the whole family. Truly, truly tragic.
Absolutely. Well, very much looking forward to that. And in order to do this, you've got some strategic partnerships as well that you've been announcing to help you with this and other things that your company is working on. Can you describe or go a little bit more into detail about them? You have one with the University of British Columbia. You've got SISCAPA Assay Technologies and Eyam Vaccines as well. What led to you to choose these partnerships? But more specifically, what will each of them be focusing on?
Well, UBC is one of the top universities in the world. It's probably in the top 20 universities. It's probably certainly number one or number two on depending on the modality in Canada. So being able to work with UBC and utilizing the Michael Smith Laboratory in itself is huge for us. It gives our company instant recognition. It gives an instant credibility. We're not working with a university in the Caribbean. We're working with UBC, which is the standards, like I say, of the top 20 universities in the world. So that's large. And we're doing our primary research there. Our second partnership is with a company called SISCAPA Assay Technologies. And what it does, it has a specific way of testing for biomarkers. And so our biomarker that we've developed is being fully developed in SISCAPA. And the nice thing about it is that it can be looked at within a blood spot, a dried blood spot. So you don't need to go to a laboratory and have a tube of blood drawn in order to do it. You can actually just poke your finger, put it on a film, and the dried blood spot can be tested. And that's important because that dried blood spot, it doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to be put in a special container. You can actually just throw it in an envelope and mail it in, and it can be tested. So very, very important. SISCAPA technology is leading the world. They're doing a lot of work on COVID-19 in the UK, where they can quantify and qualitate. They're both quantitative and qualitative tests. So they can tell you as you're getting better or as you're getting worse, which is key to it. And then the third partnership we have is with Eyam Vaccines. And Eyam is a second, possibly a third generation vaccine company. And when I say vaccines, what I'm actually saying is an immunotherapeutic. So vaccines turn your body on to fight bad stuff. Whether it's cancers, whether it's viruses or bacteria, which are the common ones that we know, we're now seeing that you can turn your body on to fight other illnesses. And we've signed an agreement with Eyam Vaccines to utilize all their CNS vaccines. And again, critically important because we can go after things such as multiple sclerosis. We can go after things such as Alzheimer's disease, as we mentioned earlier. Depression is one that we'll be working on very, very quickly. But we have the ability and the licensing to look at all the CNS diseases. So again, incredibly important. These diseases affect millions of people worldwide.
Yeah, and whenever we can find some sort of a new treatment for them is always an exciting time, whether you're an investor or just an individual who may be affected from this one way or the other. And in order to do this, obviously, you need to do clinical trials. Another thing that you were announcing over the last little while was the clinical trials that will be happening in Q1 2022. Those will be done by your newly appointed Chief Clinical Officer, who will be overseeing and leading all of these. Can you take a moment to discuss the three core areas that your team will be focusing on, but also the individual that you brought on very recently, too?
Yeah, Irina Serenkova has been a real find for us. She came to us from the Vancouver Prostate Center, where she essentially set up clinical trials for them. She's an MD, PhD. And there are not many MD PhDs out there. And so it was a huge find for us to bring her along. She's going to be coordinating both the development and the evaluation of our clinical trials, and she's going to be following through with those. So that's huge. You know, as with any drug development company, which we are, it's important that you have clinical trials. So having competent people run them and design them is critical. What we will be going on and what we will be working on, first of all, we have a submission going into the government of Australia, actually in a partnership with Monash University in Australia, in order to access their funding for psilocybin and depression. And this is incredibly important because they're going to be using our biomarkers. The Australian government has put aside $15 million to study psychedelics and depression. So, you know, kudos to the Australian government for doing this. They're very foresighted, and we're working with some of the top researchers in Australia in order to put a submission forward. It's worth $15 million over 3 years, and we think there'll be, you know, several of them will be accepted, but we certainly are looking forward to that. We're also doing another study looking at COVID and depression. There's a very high incidence and a very high correlation of depression with COVID. And what we're seeing is that ties in very nicely to our theories about neuroinflammation. We're also adding into that COVID fog. And this is something that upwards of 20 or 30% of people who have COVID are still seeing after COVID is gone, after there are no viruses, they're still having psychiatric and central nervous system disorders that they're now classifying as COVID fog. So we think that we can certainly do something with that. And then we're also looking at depression and psilocybin analogs, which is our core competency, and we'll be moving forward with those as well. So we're pretty excited about the clinical trials that we're doing. We think they're going to all be publishable. These are not, again, something that you just simply do and then report stats and figures and no one can correlate. These are all publishable studies, and we're very excited about it.
Yeah, very, very interesting. Each one has so much breadth that it can really affect people's lives, hopefully in that positive manner in which your team is going for. So I appreciate that very much. Lastly, I'd like to speak a little bit more about the stock, because you've been trading for just under 2 months now, and we saw a big spike in those opening days of trading, and then a clear sign that many investors were unwilling to part with their shares. Has been a slower start in terms of volume traded. Now, we have seen a retrace from those highs, and the stock has become a little bit more active in recent days. What will your team be doing to continue to get your story in front of investors so they can hear all of the things that you were just speaking about now, but also all the things you're going to continue to do in the near future?
Yeah, it's really interesting. There's good and bad in everything, right? And one of the things that happened to us is we brought in investors who were really excited about our company. And the problem with excitement is that they want to hang on because they want to see the highs that the stock ultimately will bring. And so there's very little liquidity in the stock. At the price, it was not that liquid. I think as we saw the price come down a little bit, we're seeing more liquidity. But again, there's 7.5 million shares out there that are free trading. And those shares are being held tightly because they love our company. They like to see what we're going to do in the future, and they see the possibilities in this company. So we're going out right now, and we're talking to a lot of people. We're doing a lot of investor relations, talking to people all over the world about what we're doing. The study that's coming out in one of the major journals obviously will help us. We're talking about our patents. We're talking about everything that we're doing. So overall, I think we can look forward to the price going up quite substantially. We think that we will have some pretty great results to show in early to mid fall of this year. So this is not a long-term hold like a lot of the companies that we're seeing, where we'll actually be seeing some results very, very quickly. And one of the reasons for that is that this is not something that was just thought up in on the toilet or something like that. What this is 10 years of work. Our scientists have been working at this for 10 years, and we decided it's now time to bring it forward and try and help those 300 million plus people who have psychiatric disorders.
Absolutely. And again, very excited because I know we're speaking about some clinical trials that were starting in Q1 of 2022. But as you were saying earlier, there have been many things that have been on the go with your company. And it's sounding like in the fall, Q3 or maybe Q4, we'll start seeing some of those results. So very, very excited for that. Well, Dr. Oberg, I thank you so much for your time and to go into detail about this release that you recently just had, but also just giving investors a little bit more of an understanding about what it is that your team is doing and what it is that you're looking to accomplish as well. So I appreciate very much your time. I look forward to being able to speak to you again in the near future when we have more to share about your company.
Thank you very much, Brandon.